Hi there, and welcome to Game Design. We have 20 videos here for you, and if you complete the entire course, you should understand a bit about the process of game design and have the conceptual tools you need to start designing your own games. So consider this a start to what could be a lifelong journey.
If you're curious who I am, my name is Ian Schreiber. I've been designing games professionally for about 20 years as of the time of this video. I've worked full-time for a number of game companies on a variety of projects, mostly nothing famous that you'd have heard of. That's typical for game designers. I've worked on published tabletop games as well as video games, and I've also taught game design in the classroom at a variety of schools going back over 15 years. I've also written 3 books on game design, the game industry, and most recently, a book on game balance. This module is about the overall course, so it's worth starting out by drawing some lines. I say I'm going to teach you game design. What do I mean by that? What is game design? And to answer that, first we'll want to break down a bit about how games are actually made. So think about any video game you've played, any at all. But don't think about the experience of play. Think instead about what would you have to do in order to make something like that? What are the pieces, what are the building blocks that go into making a game? The first thing you'll probably notice is the visuals. You can see things on the screen, characters, enemies, the environment that you're in, sometimes a display showing your health bar or lives or other information. This is the art of the game, and it's made by visual artists. Once you start thinking about art, you might think next about sound. Most games have background music, sound effects, and in some places, actual character voices recorded by human voice actors. These are done by people who work in sound. They might be called composers, sound designers, or game audio. Then there's the rules and mechanics of the game. Someone has to make all the decisions about what exactly is in the game. Who's the player? What can they do? What happens when they do each thing? Can you jump in the game? If you can, how high can you jump? How far can you jump? What button do you have to press to jump? Do you jump differently if you hold the button down versus just tapping it lightly? Can you double jump or wall jump or mid-air dash? If you're in the middle of a jump, can you reverse direction? And if so, is it immediate or do you have to fight against your forward momentum? What happens in the game when you aren't jumping? Are enemies moving? Is there a timer counting down? Is the level auto-scrolling? These choices of how the game actually works, that's what we call game design. Specifically, these kinds of things are called systems design, which is a part of game design. Designer Liz England wrote a wonderful short essay called The Door Problem. If you're interested, I'd recommend reading through it. It's not very long. The URL is right here, or you can just Google Liz England Door Problem and find it. It's a great example of what game designers and other people on a game development team actually do. Game design is not just about coming up with a brilliant high concept for a game. It's about coming up with all the little details about something as simple as how does a player interact with a door, and every other little micro interaction in the entire game. Now think about all of the options and choices it takes just to describe exactly how a door works in your game, and then expand that out to every other interaction with everything in the environment. And you can see why a lot of video games take hundreds of people working full-time over the course of years just to make one game. Related to that is the actual content of the game, which is usually also done by game designers. What are all the enemies in the game? How does each enemy work? What kinds of other hazards or interactive objects are there in the environment? Can you find items or equipment? Where do you find them? What do they do? Also, if the game has distinct levels or physical space that the player is traversing, how is that space laid out? That's a special kind of content design that we call level design. Another kind of content is the story, the narrative, the backstory, dialogue, all the other things that have to get written for the game. This is done by game writers. In some game studios, writing is considered part of game design. In other studios, game writing is distinct from systems design or level design or other types of game design. But in either case, the story writers have to work very closely with other designers to make sure that the story fits with everything else. Lastly, someone has to take all of that design stuff and translate it into a language the computer understands. This is programming, sometimes called coding. While you usually don't see this part directly when you play a game, it is there under the surface because the video game knows what the rules are and how to enforce them on you as a player. So you do need programmers writing code so that the computer or console or other electronic device that you're playing on knows how to play the game. I like to compare making a game to building a high-rise building. No one says, I make skyscrapers for a living. These are large projects that require multiple teams of specialized people working together. And there's a lot of parallels between that and game development. First, you have the architects who don't actually build anything, but they create the blueprints and plans to say, this is the building we're going to build. That's what game designers do for games. We create plans called design documents instead of blueprints, and those tell the rest of the team what we're going to build. In fact, in Japan, game designers are called planners for this reason. We plan the game. Then you have the people who actually build the building from the plans. This is construction workers, engineers, plumbers, electricians, and everyone else who actually builds the building according to the blueprints. In game development, this is what the programmers do. They take the plans, the design documents from the designers, and make that into the actual game. Then in buildings, you have interior designers and landscapers who take the building and make it look beautiful and interesting and inviting. That's kind of what visual artists do in games. They make the game look nice. Audio, well, unless you're talking about choosing what music gets piped into the lobby of an office building, there's not a whole lot of audio there. But, so the analogy breaks down there. But, audio also important in games. In addition to that, when you're building a building, there's usually someone on the team called a general contractor. They keep the other teams organized and make sure that the project runs on time and on budget. We have these people in game development too. They're called producers or project managers. Buildings also have safety inspectors and structural engineers who make sure that the building won't collapse and kill everyone inside. In games, we call these people QA, or quality assurance, and those people are tasked with making sure that the game runs properly and doesn't have any crashes or errors or other bugs. And if they do find them, they'll send it back to the other teams to fix. So you might be worried, okay, if that means that I need all these different people just to make a video game, does that mean that I have to learn all these things? Do I have to learn programming and art and all of this just to make a game? And the good news is, no, you don't. As I said, while video games usually are made by teams of specialists that all do one thing, not everything is critical for every project. For example, not all games need programming. There's board games, card games, other tabletop games. Those contain 0 lines of code. In fact, many university programs in game design start out teaching game design with board games because there are almost pure game design. You can create a playable tabletop game with no code, no audio, no art, or minimal art. The rules of the game, the mechanics of your game, that is the game design. And I like to say that, if you want to be famous in game design, do the big budget console or PC games. If you want to be rich from game design, do free to play. But if you want to be good at game design, do board games. So, and even with video games, game design is something of a superpower. If you're lacking certain skills on your team, you can find a clever way to design around just about any deficit. For example, say you don't have an artist on your team. What can you do? Well, one thing you could do is, an example would be a completely blank screen. That's not a problem with the video. That's not a completely blank screen. That's actually a screenshot from a game called Blindscape, where the entire game is played in the dark because your main character is blind. You get around by listening to the environment and narration, and then tapping on different parts of the screen to find your way around. Another example of games that don't need graphics are text adventures, interactive fiction, and other games that are told entirely through writing. This is a screenshot from a game that it's made in a game engine called Twine, which doesn't even require much in the way of programming. It's mostly typing text and dialogue and then choices. The Twine engine will change that into clickable links that run in a browser as HTML. This game in particular is an extremely satirical view of what it's like to be a game writer. Now, just to be humble here, you can also make video games without a game designer. If, for example, you want to learn game programming, I would recommend just making clones of classic arcade games from the early 1970s to start out. Those games are relatively simple, so you can learn a lot of basics of code there. The game already exists. You can probably find sprites sheets online for any old game, so the art already exists. You don't have to worry about anything except doing the programming. Now, if you make a clone of an old video game, you might not be able to sell that, and it won't be original at all, but it is great for learning code since you can just focus on the code part and not the design part. Likewise, if you just want to focus on art, you can just make art. There are even many games that are moddable where you can just take the core game, swap in your art for their art, and now you have an art mod. So, this design track of 20 videos, starting with this one, is all about game design, how to plan games and fill them with content. Now, we aren't learning about the other parts like coding or art or audio, and that means you will not be able to make your own video game entirely just from the skills that you're learning here. If you do want to make your own video games, you're going to either need to learn the other skills on your own through other modules or other resources that you find, or find other people who can do those things and are willing to team up with you. So just to set expectations here, if you go through all 20 modules in the design track, this is not going to make you fully prepared for an entire career in game design either. You're not going to get hired as a game designer just after doing these 20 lessons, but it will expose you to all of the pieces of game design and give you the conceptual tools you need to start designing your own games right now. Let's take a look at what we'll cover. So first, we're going to give you a basic toolkit for playing, analyzing, and understanding games. I'll give you the vocabulary to talk about all the different parts of games and the different ways of thinking about games, and talk a bit about the history of games as a medium and how to find interesting games from the past in order to research your own ideas in the present. From there, we'll spend some time talking about the nature of what makes games fun. What does fun even mean? And getting some better ways to break that down into something understandable, and how to relate that to what we do as designers. We'll do that using a conceptual tool called the MDA framework that is well known in the field and taught as part of most game design courses of study at university programs. From there, we'll take a bit of a diversion to talk about story writing in games, first looking at traditional storytelling through things like books and movies, and then adding some special things you can do with interactive stories in games. Again, sometimes story writing is done by specialized story writers, sometimes by game designers, but every game designer should at least know a little bit about story. Next, we'll look at how the designer interacts with the player through the rules of the game, and how to make those interactions fun and interesting. If you've ever played a game that just wasn't fun, or it felt like a grind, or a game felt interesting at first but then spun completely out of control, either became way too easy or way too hard toward the end, here's where you'll understand why that happened and how to prevent it in your own games. After that, we'll come back full circle to the MDA framework and the concept of fun, and then relate that back to players. Here's a partial spoiler for you. What one player finds fun might not be fun for someone else. Just as there are different kinds of fun, there are also different kinds of players. So we will look at a couple of common ways that designers think about their player audience and how to design games specifically for them. After that, we'll spend a couple of modules on one of the best known subspecialties of game design, level design. Level design is actually very different if you're designing for PvE or PvP. PvE is a player versus environment game. That is, something that's single player or multiplayer co-op, where the game itself provides the enemies, environmental hazards, and other resistance that you face. Compare that to PvP, or player versus player, where the other players are playing against you, and it's your human opponents that are providing the challenge. The rules of level design for creating a great PvE level, like you might find in Mario, is very different from creating a great PvP level, like you might find in Counter-Strike. So we'll treat each of those situations separately as part of its own unit. Speaking of resistance that players face in games, the resistance is supposed to come from overcoming the game's challenges, not from trying to understand the controls or what's happening on the screen. This is where user interface and user experience design come in, UI and UX, thinking about how to design the controls, the screen layout, and generally how the player and the game communicate with each other to make the experience that you want. Now, a big part of game design is playtesting putting the game in front of actual players and having them play, and looking for problem areas where the game isn't giving the experience you wanted, and then going back and making changes to the game and playing it again. Usually we recommend this for any project. Any game designer will say, yeah, playtesting is important. You should do that. But in this course, I'll actually give you some practical on-the-ground tips about how do you actually set up and run a playtest, where do you find playtesters, and what do you do with your playtest results when you have them in order to make the most use of your playtesting time. Now, one element of design that players talk a lot about is game balance. So basically how to make the game feel fair and control its pacing. So in the game balance module, I'll talk briefly about what game balance is, how it's done, and give you some tools beyond just playtesting to help you balance your game. Just as playtesting is important, it's done for almost every project, and we're going to give practical examples on how to do that here. Same thing is true for building prototypes to actually test. In the rapid prototyping module, we'll talk about what a game prototype is, how to design and build one, and what to do with it once you're done. Now, as I said before, game designers are planners. So a lot of what we do is write down plans and then communicate those plans to the rest of our development team. So we will spend a fair amount of time in this track just talking about the different ways that designers write down their plans and how they communicate those to the rest of the team so that everyone working together is clear about what the game is that they're building and how it's being built. And then at the very end of this track, we'll finish up with one module talking about where to go from here. It might be that you will learn enough here to start designing your own games for fun. That's all you want to do is just make your own hobby games as part of a hobby, and that's totally fine. Then you could stop there and just make some games and have fun. Or you might go through this entire design track and then decide somewhere along the way that you hate game design. You never want to do any of this. It sounded cool on paper, but this is just really not something you ever want to be involved in again. You'd rather do something else with your time, and that is also perfectly fine. I would much rather you figure that out now while it's easy to change your mind and you're not really spending anything other than a little bit of time doing this. But you might also go through this and absolutely fall in love with everything about the game design track. You want to keep going. You might even think about how can I make game design my career for the rest of my life? So I will end by talking about what that path looks like, what kinds of things you might do after finishing this track to prepare yourself for the realities of the game industry, what kind of careers are available, and what you could do to prepare for them. Now, at the end of each video in the series, I'll also provide some additional resources for you. If you really like the topic that we're talking about and you just want to dive a bit deeper, here's what you want. These additional resources are completely optional. You do not need it in order to pass the class. It's just for you personally if you're curious and want to know more about a particular topic. Now, this course is very surface level. Game design is something people can learn and study over an entire lifetime and still be learning even 40 years in. So what I can cover in 20 minutes is just the most basic information to get you started on your journey. So these additional links are where to go if you want to continue that journey. In the case of this video here, I was mostly just giving you an idea of what to expect from this video series, so there's not much here other than the link to the door problem article, but other videos can cover a lot more about what game design is. Those will have a lot more stuff here.
So now, stay tuned for your assessment so you can get your certification from HP Gaming Garage. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.